So Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez floated the idea of a top marginal tax rate of 60 to 70% in an interview with 60 Minutes. And the reactions to this on the right and in mainstream media have been, genuinely hilarious. Laugh out loud funny. And the reason why it's funny is that so many so-called experts about politics and about the economy literally have no idea what a marginal tax rate is. None whatsoever. Yet they feel the need to chime in and give opinions that they think you should hear when they don't even get the basics of this conversation. So, here's just one example. Actually, I'll end up giving two examples probably, but this is Grover Norquist, who's considered the tax guy on the right. He's considered like the premier tax expert on the right, and he makes Republican politicians sign this pledge of no new taxes or something like that when they get elected. And look at what he said. Slavery is when your owner takes 100% of your production. Democrat Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez wants 70% according to CNN. What is the word for 70% expropriation? That is not how marginal tax rates work, dipshit. That's not even close. So let's be crystal clear about what she floated. 60 to 70% rate on everything above $10 million a year in income. So do you have any idea how different that is from, the government's going to come and take 70% of your money? And of course, the framing on the right is like, a farmer who makes $40,000 a year, and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is going to come with her army of Stalinists and like take 70% of your $40,000 that you earned. That is so hilariously wrong, I can't even begin to wrap my mind around it or describe it properly, okay? For somebody who makes that amount of money, I'm sure Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez would at the very least keep the tax rate the same, maybe lower the tax rate, but also give these people way more services that they deserve, like free college, like Medicare for all. So, what an amazing thing where they flip the reality right on its head. They try to frame it like this person who is clearly fighting for the working class, somehow she's the enemy of the working man. And what's their evidence for that? A total smear and sheer ignorance of not knowing how marginal tax rates work. Now, people have responded to me when I pointed this out on Twitter, and they said, no, I think they're being cynical and they're just lying. They know how marginal tax rates work, but they're just lying to their listeners, their followers, these right-wing voters, so that they use this as a fear-mongering tactic to, make people dislike Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and the left. I completely disagree with that. I genuinely don't think that they know how marginal tax rates work. And what's one of the main reasons why that is? Because even corporate media is like, oh yeah, that's when they take 70% of all your money, right? No, that's not what it is. So you have mainstream media doesn't know how it works. You have overpaid idiots who just give their opinion. They don't know how it works. And then you have Republican politicians who don't know how it works. So this is Grover Norquist comparing a top marginal rate of 70%, again, on income earned over $10 million. So what that means is your first $10 million is taxed at a much lower rate. This is what a progressive tax system is. Hey, your first $50,000 might be at a rate of 10%. And then the 50,000 to 100,000 range, that might be taxed at 15% or something like that. And then 100,000 to 250,000, that might be taxed at 20 or 25%. And then, everything over 10 million is 70%. Every dollar over 10 million, you tax that at 70%. But that doesn't even tell the whole story, because that's without, including how the deductions and loopholes work. So you have to factor that in to a nominal rate of 70%, a nominal marginal rate of 70%. So I know with idiots like Grover Norquist, they're already lost in the conversation. They're like, well, I don't understand what Kyle's saying. That's right, because you're a dumbass and you're a fraud and you've been put forth as this like brilliant right-wing tax expert. And I don't understand a goddamn thing about marginal tax rates. Okay, so, one more example of this. Guys, unbelievable. You know who else doesn't know what a marginal tax rate is? Steve Scalise, Republican leadership. And AOC fired back at him when he smeared her, and she was like, you're in Republican leadership. How do you not know how marginal tax rates work? Now, some people, even after hearing the way marginal tax rates work, might go, well, I mean, but come on, Kyle. That sounds too scary. That sounds like too much anyway, and I have a disagreement with her even understanding how marginal tax rates work. Okay, fair opinion to have. However, in order to really form a solid opinion on this, agree or disagree with her, you got to know all the facts. Like, you have to know the history of this before you make your mind up. Because if not, then you're literally the textbook definition of ignorant. So before you actually make up your mind, let me show you the historical tax rate historical tax rates, in the U.S. So this is the historical marginal tax rate for highest and lowest income earners. Look at this. So in what was called the golden age of economic expansion in the U.S., which is about, 1945 or 1950 until about 1970 or so, that's what's considered the golden age of economic expansion, when the U.S. was the economic powerhouse of the world, and we had amazing manufacturing, and we had high unionization rates and a really strong working class, middle class. During that period, the top marginal rate was anywhere between 70% and 93%. You probably didn't know this, did you? Well, that's because mainstream media does not fucking educate people. Your history class, your social studies class, they did not educate you. They didn't do it. Now, is there a debate as to where we should draw that line? Yes, there's a debate as to, okay, what do you want to do? Some people would try to tax 70% over $1 million a year. That's what some people would say. Some people would try to tax 70% for every dollar made over $5 million a year. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez saying, let's tax let's have a top marginal rate of 70% for everything over 10 million. Not only is that not radical, that is actually right in line with the most reasonable kinds of systems that exist that have the best social outcomes. So, for example, Sweden has a top marginal tax rate of 70%. Now, again, we could debate as to where you draw the line and income per year over what line should you tax at 70%. But the idea that it's radical, no, actually what's radical is what we have in the U.S. right now. We have a top marginal tax rate of about 39%, and we have insane income and wealth inequality where the wealth of the top 1% is so out of control that they literally have the means to buy the government and rig the rules against regular people in their favor. There is such a thing as a level of wealth that is so destructive to the fabric of society that it shouldn't even be allowed, that you need to have a progressive tax system in order to prevent the total and utter destruction of democracy. So now you know, the golden age of economic expansion, top marginal tax rate in the U.S. was between 70% and 93%. So this idea that it's going to hurt economic growth, wrong. We had the best economy we've ever had when we had a top marginal rate of between 70% and 93%. So now you know that. Let me show you a Jeff Stein tweet. AOC floated a 70% tax rate on those making more than $10 million with some help. We ran the numbers and found that would raise up to $720 billion over 10 years from about just 16,000 of the richest Americans. So reflect on that for a second. We live in a country that realistically has about 340 million people. About 16,000 would get hit by this top marginal rate of 70%. 340 million people, only 16,000 would feel it. And you have a bunch of people who make like 40 grand a year who are like, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is trying to craft policy that would hurt me. You literally just have no idea what the fuck you're talking about, if that's what you believe. Okay. He continues, for context, here's how much some things cost over 10 years. Free college, $800 billion. You could almost totally fund free college with this idea. Universal pre-K, $75 billion. You could fund that multiple times over. Forgive U.S. student loan debt is $1.4 trillion. You could put a big dent in that. About half of it you could do. Pipe replacement in Flint, $55 million. How many times can you fix the pipes in Flint with this money? Schumer-Pelosi plan for boosting teacher pay, $100 billion. So you could do that one multiple times over as well. So, listen. The reaction to this is exposing so much about what's rotten in our system. You have the elites and mainstream media and the elected Republican politicians deeply, deeply ignorant of U.S. history, of economics around the world. I mean, if this is such a terrible idea, then why is it Sweden has it implemented and they kick our ass on virtually every objective measure of how healthy your society is, according to the UN? Okay, they have a stronger middle class than we do. They have more vacation time than we do. They have a better healthcare system. They have a better education system. They self-report as being way happier. This is a standard social democratic proposal that would improve the lives of the overwhelming majority of Americans, while barely, these people who make this much money would barely even feel it. Because you're talking 70% on over $10 million, every dollar above $10 million annual income. So here's the deal. If you want to disagree with that, and it's fair to disagree with it and to have a different line as to the dollar number above which you tax and a different idea as to what the tax rate should be, you can disagree with it, but just know what the fuck you're talking about. Know the history of it. Know the reality of the situation, that this is the case in tax rates like this are the case in most developed countries. Belgium, I gave one example. Sweden is another example. I don't happen to know the specifics of a bunch of the other European nations, but I'm sure that you're in about the same ballpark. So just know the reality of it. Just know the reality of it. And to try to frame this as, oh, it's the government taking 70% of your money, regular working person, that's not even close to true. That's like abysmally wrong in trying to understand what a marginal tax rate is. So, but really what this should show you is it takes the mask off of a rotten system. And it shows you how few people know what the fuck they're talking about in mainstream media and among the establishment on the right. They just don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And honestly, this should be a wake-up call for a lot of people out there who might be on the fence. You know, maybe you've been listening to secular talk for whatever, 2 or 3 months, and I kind of like Kyle, but I don't agree with him on a lot of stuff, and, you know, I still consider myself on the right. Well, you just have to understand something here. This is one of those issues where there's no other interpretation of it. The Republican politicians are just factually wrong. Mainstream media is just factually wrong. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is proposing an international moderate idea. That's what this is. A very centrist proposal in the rest of the developed world. In the sense that a lot of these other countries have it. When you poll regular folks, they're like, yeah, I like that idea. So just be clear about what's really happening here, what she's really proposing, and what the implications really are. Because there's so much misinformation, and it's so destructive. And final point, I haven't even brought this up yet, but again, even floating that 70% rate for all income above $10 million, you know what the effective rate would be when you do all the loopholes and whatnot? And this was the case even in the golden age of economic expansion in the U.S. It's not like that nominal rate was the actual rate people paid, between 70 and 93%. That wasn't the actual marginal tax rate that they paid. After you account for all the loopholes and stuff, their effective rate was about 43 to 45%. So I'm sure that if we were to go back to that rate, that top marginal rate, with all the fucking corporations and the individuals and the rich individuals' team of lawyers that they have, they would find the loopholes and get that shit down to 43 to 45%. So, we have here a Justice Democrat moving the Overton window back to a place of sanity, and just understand all the facts about it before you, have some sort of uninformed opinion, and you look like a total douche weasel like Grover Norquist and Republican leader Steve Scalise.